subject in
not,
different
and if not,
respects.
stop talking, shut up. And if not, it's going to be the case that it would not be not P, but rather just another arbitrary proposition like Q, for instance.
Um,
What you're talking
yeah,
about here is P and Q, not P and not P. If it is P and not P, then necessarily it's talking about the same goddamn thing. It's just that one
oh
is
my
going to be negating
goodness.
that
We can
about
talk
the
about
proposition.
P and not P. Yes, we can talk about that in the same subject insofar as different respects. The same way I can have one part of me which is black and one part of me which is white or not
That
black,
would be not
and these are
P.
not contradictory.
That
And
would
the
be
reason
not
why it's
P,
not
sorry.
contradictory is because the two parts lack identity
That would
between
be
one
not
another.
P, because in the first proposition you're talking about part X, and in the other proposition, which is going to be a negation, you're talking about part Y. So it's not P, it's just another proposition Q. It's just saying
Another
P and not
proposition which is
Q. That
not the
wouldn't be a
other one. So then I
Sorry,
contradiction.
can say
guys.
subject X is black and not black, which according to you is a contradiction. The same way you can say
You're just
a
gibbering right
subject
now
is
without even know what you're
omniscient
talking
and not
about. Right? So
omniscient.
what are you giving an example of? So if I say, for example, that a part of me is a soul or is non-physical, and another part of me is physical, or if I say a part of me is physical and another part of me is non-physical, that's not P and not P, dumb fuck. That would be expressible as P and not P in propositional logic. That would be expressible as P and Q because these are two different propositions, two completely different propositions insofar as the proposition with the negation operator would not be talking about the same thing in the initial proposition. So it would not be a contradiction. In this case, it would be a contradiction because you're talking about the same exact subject, unless you're going to want to say that it is the case that Jesus or God is going to be composed of parthoods, which in any case is going to violate another aspect of his divine essence, and that would result in the stage 2 version of the argument.
Are you not? Did you not listen to what you said? You said you're talking about the same subject being material and immaterial. So like we can talk about like the soul body composite, which even you guys in Islam hold to. Then how are we gonna say something like the soul body composite's even possible? Because we're talking about two different things, but we're still talking about the same two different things in
You
the
think
same
talking about two
subject,
different things
or
automatically
that
negates the
compose one in the
possibility of the
same
proposition being
subject.
correct?
Hmm?
You think talking about two different things automatically negates the possibility of the proposition being correct?
What? That it's a contradiction? Yeah.
You're asking me how is it possible because I'm talking about two different things. We talk about two different things in conjunctive claims all the time, even if it is not contradictory. So if I say P
So
and Q,
so
if I say P and Q, real quickly, if I say P and Q satisfies the condition of being in the set of T, it's not the case that that's contradictory, even though it is the case of talking about two different things or subjects.
well, you're talking about two different subjects, not properly. If we talk about the proper subject, it would be the one composite person in your case, which is
You're not
the
exactly
human
what's
being.
going on, right? This is just a bad for you. This is like a bad look, right? So I'm saying
It's not
that if
tracking.
you're going to be saying that this is like a bad look for you, right? It's like really embarrassing. So what I'm saying here is in the conversation, right? If I'm talking about the same subject, right, then it would necessarily be the case that there would be a contradiction if I'm affirming P of that subject and I'm affirming not P of that subject. The example you're given is an example where you're talking about someone having a part or more than one parts, whereas each part have different individualistic characteristics. In that case, it would not be about the same subject because in one proposition, you're talking about part A as one subject S, and in another proposition, you're talking about part B, which is a separate subject, which would be subject not S or subject Q, for example, which in any case would be something which is not going to be coextensional nor co-intentional. So it would not be a contradiction. It's not P and not P in that case, so that's disanalogous.
Okay, so when we talk about P and not talk about like P and not P being of the same set, which we're talking about like for example, a human being in your case, which I was trying to point out to you, which is the body soul composite. Obviously, there's two different subjects, which is the soul and the
These
body,
guys are making up
which in the
words
case
and
of Christ
becoming
is the divinity and the
subject.
humanity. So then saying that both of these are part of the same set, and insofar as that they're true of the same subject, we can say since they're true of the same hypostasis, then they're true of the same subject. But other than that, there's no contradiction because they're in different respects. You keep trying to say this is
Okay, so
impossible,
you
but
understand that
then
you're
you
going to be saying
contradict
that they're in
Islam.
different respect. That assumes that you're talking about different subjects, right? So I'll give you like one example. So if I say that, let's say I have a table in front of me, and I say this table is red and it is black. We know black is not red, of course. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, The only way in which that would not be contradictory is if, when I say the table is red and black, what I mean there is a part of the table, like the upper part of the table, is red, and the legs of the table is black. But in this case, we're not talking about different parts here. It's not a matter of I'm talking about different parts of a particular subject which possesses both parts. We're talking about a specific being which is an embodiment of the fullness of the human nature and the fullness of the divine nature. He's not partially divine, he's not partially human. He's fully divine and he's fully human. If you're going to want to say, however, that there's partage which are going to be invoked, right, then there's going to be an issue for your position insofar as now the problem is God is going to be a composite object. And if God is a composite object, then that's going to be in contradiction and in opposition to another divine attribute that he also possesses, which is the characteristic of mutability, which is going to go into the stage 2 version of the argument. But you're not going to want to say that. And by the way, and stop talking. And by the way, Orthodox Trinitarians and Christians are not going to be making the claim that Jesus or God specifically is partly human and partly divine. A lot of Thomists, for example, are going to be believing in divine simplicity, so they're not going to be only making that claim, right? So which one is it? Are going to be saying that Jesus is partly human and partly divine, which in any case is going to lead to another contradiction, or are going to agree that Jesus is fully human and fully divine, which is going to entail the contradiction which is established and demonstrated in the initial argument, given the fact they would be talking about the same subject. Which one is it? Pick your struggle.
Okay, so you didn't solve the issue. All you did was push it further back. Because my whole point is that what about being part solves the contradiction or resolves the contradiction? It's the lack of identity between the two parts. So if we say that the divinity and the humanity lack identity, but they don't constitute the hypostasis, both of them together, then we can still resolve it the same way the part resolves it. So then I'm confused as to how this is any different from the that composition scenario, other than
You just did a whole
the
bunch
two
of math.
parts
When I answer this
constitutes in
person's
that instance,
question,
or it's perfect composition. But in Christ's case,
you
it's
just
imperfect
when I answer
composition.
this person's question, is it the case that you believe that Jesus is fully human and fully divine? Yes or no?
Insofar as he possesses both natures, yeah.
So he's fully human and fully divine. So that means it is not the case that part of Jesus is divine and part of Jesus is human, but rather Jesus in fullness is divine and Jesus in fullness is human, correct? At least when he was on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that means you cannot say that they're talking about the same subject in different respects, because for that to be the case, it has to be sure that when I'm affirming that Jesus is going to be human, for example, I'm talking about a specific part of a specific part of Jesus Christ, which is not going to be talking about the entirety of Jesus Christ. And when I say Jesus is divine, I'm talking about the separate part of Jesus Christ. But you just agreed on the proposition that Jesus is fully human and fully divine, which in any case excludes the possibility of that proposition, which is going to be the conjunct of P and not P, be talking about different aspects of Jesus Christ. So that's going to be in opposition to the exact same escape route you're trying to utilize to escape the contradiction. And so now you have to bite the bullet and concede to the contradiction. You're fucked. You just
I'm
play
not getting.
yourself.
I'll just ask you this, Apollo. What about it being a
No,
part
could you
resolves
just
the
give a counter
contradiction?
argument?
I already did. You're not understanding. So answer my
Okay.
question. What about it being a part resolves the contradiction?
You said it's not part. That would be irrelevant to the conversation.
This is
Are you retarded?
irrelevant. What about it being a
Are
part
you
resolves
stupid?
the
Your
contradiction,
position is
Apollo?
that Jesus
Because
is
if
not
it's
going to
the
be
lack of
partly divine
identity,
and partly human to be part. Your position, you just a while ago on the recording, just a couple seconds ago, just a while ago, that it is going to be the case that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. So I don't even need to show
okay. So if you're
contradiction.
gonna
I
go
don't
on an
even stop
irrelevant
talking.
tangent, I'll
Relax.
answer the
You're panicking.
question.
You're panicking.
I'll answer
Stop
it for
panicking.
you.
Relax.
The
Stop
thing
panicking.
that
Stop panicking.
saves
You're
it
talking
is the
to your
fact
friend.
of the lack
Relax.
of identity between the
Relax.
two.
Relax. Shut up. Still talking. Right? You're just panicking for no reason. And what I'm saying here is simply that your position is that it is the case that Jesus is not going to be partly divine and partly human. He's going to be fully divine and fully human. So now I have no reason to show any contradiction in Jesus or God possessing parts, because that's not your position. Your position is not embodying and exemplifying the proposition that he's going to have parthoods, but rather it's you conceding that he's fully divine and fully human. So given that position, there would be a contradiction. I'm attacking your position, your version of Trinitarianism, your interpretation of hypostatic union entails a contradiction. Now I can talk.
Yeah, anyway, so see one thing on the tangent instead of answering the question. The answer to the question is just that the two parts lack identity. That's the only special thing about the two things being part. And if that's the case, then the divinity and the humanity lack identity. Thus, the same things resolved. Unless you're going to point out some other reason as to why parts resolve the contradiction, then we're just going to sit here and say, yeah, we can hold to the hypostatic union. So go ahead, Apollo, and object to what I said.
That's just a blunder. That's just a blunder again, right? Because you agree that they're not parts. You said that Jesus is fully human and fully divine, which excludes the possibility of Jesus being partly human and partly divine. And if he's not partly human and he's not partly divine and he's fully human and fully divine, then that means divinity and humanity as essences would not be parts. So you asking me to show the contradiction and him possessing these parts is in opposition to your position, which entails that these things would not be parts in virtue of you agreeing that he's fully human and fully divine. This is a basic freaking point of making basic blunders. This is like something which any person with an entry level logic and philosophy would understand. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you have an objection to the argument presented in the chat? Are you going to
Yeah,
concede
okay.
again that the premises of the argument is true, which is also the conclusion being true, which is also in your position being contradictory? Which one is it?
Okay. Anywho, um, I'm gonna say this last thing, and then if Apollo doesn't address my argument, then we can just move on. The fully human and fully divine thing doesn't exclude them being parts. We don't believe that Christ has parts in the proper sense, but you're just wrong on that it excludes it. Because in the way that we're saying X is fully human and fully divine, to be the same way we can say the table is fully black and fully white. All we mean is that he possesses all that it means to be black and all that it means to be white, or all that it means to be red. So then that in that case you can still have parts but have the fully X and fully Y, or fully P and fully not P. Um so if
Okay,
you're not
that's
going
like
to address my
retarded,
other
right? So,
argument, then we can just end
so,
it
so
there.
this is just retarded, right? So I'm going to show you why this just contradicts her again, and you're just going to like basically fuck yourself one more time with the conversation, right? So if I say that whyfun or someone like mentality possesses all the characteristics of being 5'4", right? Like it's fully 5'4" first. Now, what it means to be fully 5'4" in this conversation is just to possess all the necessary and relevant characteristics of being 5'4". And then I also say that he's fully 6'4". That would in fact be a contradiction insofar as it is going to be the case that possessing all the characteristics of being 6'4" is going to be in direct opposition to possessing all the characteristics of being 5'4". However, what I can in fact say is that, let's say, for example, let's say I want to say he's 5'4" and he is, let's say, 5 inches or something like that, whatever. I could say that in one respect, insofar as his bodily height, he's 5'4", but in another respects, insofar as his limbs are concerned, he would be 5 inches or something like that. And then you could say that that would not be contradiction because you're talking about different parts of mentality. You're talking about his bodily height, which is a separate part of mentality and what makes a mentality as a person. And you're talking about another part when you're saying that he's 5 inches, like a different inches, like a different limb, for example, or some specific joint on his body or something like that. In that case scenario, it would in fact be the case that there's no contradiction because the subjects are different. In one proposition, when someone is saying mentality is 5'4", they're talking about his bodily height. And in another instance, when someone is saying mentality is like, let's say, 5 limbs, they're talking about a different particular thing on his body, which is going to be not coextensional. Now, in the case of what you're talking about here, you cannot say that a chair or a table is fully black and fully white if being black and being white are not identical and they're necessarily exclusive of one another, right? So you cannot say that this would be true in fullness. You'd have to say that this table is fully black, maybe in one part of the table, like the top part of the table, for example, and you could say maybe the legs of the table is fully white or something, but you cannot say that the entirety of the table is going to be fully white and fully black perspective. That's going to always result in a contradiction given how logic works. In this case scenario, you're saying that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. You're not saying a part of Jesus is fully human and the part of Jesus is fully divine. You're saying Jesus is fully human and fully divine. That means Jesus in fullness, right? Given all the characteristics of Jesus, he's divine. And given all the characteristics of Jesus, he's human. But we know that the characteristics of being divine is being omnipotent. That's one of the essential characteristics. And we know that another essential characteristic of being human is going to be indicative of not being omnipotent. And so that's going to always result in a contradiction if you put it in any true table in logic. And so you cannot say that he's fully human and fully divine, and also adopt the position that he's partly human and partly divine, which is in contradiction to him being fully human and fully divine, which you have signed off on numerous different occasions. Very simple arguments, you know.
Yeah, you didn't have to yap for like 5 minutes to say the same thing you've been saying, bro. And you literally just denied the most
I have
basic
to repeat myself
theological
because you're easily
principle,
not track of the
which is
conversation.
what is true of the
That's
parts is
redundant.
true of the whole. We can just end this shit here. You just said that it can be true of the of part of the table that is fully black and true of part of the table that is fully white, and fully just meaning that it has the predicate. So to say it's fully black and to say it's black under the sense we're using it would be identical. So to say the whole is black and white would be not true under your view, which is fucking retarded. So we can just finish this.
Yeah, so the retard not just agreed originally on the record, which was what everyone said he conceded in less than 2 minutes, that the argument was valid and the argument was talking about his own position, and the premises are true, and the conclusion would have to follow as a result of this, which obviously entails a contradiction. But now he's retracting the proposition that Jesus is fully human and fully divine by now appealing to partas, which in the case would be incompatible with the previous proposition. Now, you said originally that he's going to be partly human, partly fine. I've repeated this so many different times because you've been repeatedly mistracking the conversation, and you don't really know what's going on here. Now, given that particular aspect, and given the characteristics of these two things, of course, they're going to be mutually exclusive, and so they cannot adopt both propositions. You cannot say that it's not a contradiction that you're